Hi everyone, my name's Evelyn and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. So a little over a week ago, the International Booker Prize longlist was announced. So this year's International Booker also marks a momentous occasion as it is the 10-year anniversary of the prize in its current form. In my previous video, I took on the challenge of trying to predict all 13 books on the longlist. While I did not predict all of them, I did predict 3 out of 13, which is one more from last year, so I'm taking that as a win. I'm really pleased with that. I successfully predicted 3 out of 13 books on the International Booker Prize longlist, and so yeah, I'm really excited to basically read as many as I can before the shortlist announcement at the end of the month. This year's International Booker is slightly different, as it's actually one of the first times that we have the shortest amount of time between the longlist announcement and the shortlist announcement. We only have a month. And given that this year's longlist has some really, really big titles, I just don't know how many I'm going to be able to get through. But I have challenged myself to read all 13 books on the longlist this year. In previous years, I have managed to read about 9 or 10 books on the longlist. I always read the entire shortlist, which is just 6 books. But this year, because it's the 10-year anniversary, I was like, if it's, 1 year that I'm going to read the long list, it has to be this year. I don't know how viable that's going to be, considering that quite a few of the books have not been published yet, or they're still not available to order. It's not looking great. However, I have been able to successfully read 5 out of 13 books on the long list. I'm currently on my 6th book, and today I would like to finish my 6th book and start my 7th. I don't know how many I'm going to be able to read before the shortlist announcement, but I'm just going to try my best to read as many as I can, and then hopefully be able to read and review them and do a shortlist predictions video in a couple of weeks. My overall thoughts on the longlist this year would be that I'm really surprised by the amount of books that I hadn't actually heard of. One of my favorite things about the International Booker Prize is the opportunity to encounter new books that I otherwise wouldn't have heard of, or getting to read new stories from around the world. And so this year, I would have to say that it's put a lot of new books on my radar that I just had not come across yet. So I'm really excited to delve into those titles. Some of those include Women Without Men, Small Comforts, and The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran. Those are some books that I had not encountered yet. There were quite a few books on my long list predictions that I was like, I could guarantee that those were going to make it, but they didn't. And so I was really surprised by the judges' direction this year. I think I'm going to do a full breakdown on everything when I do my shortlist predictions video. But I think overall, I'm pleasantly surprised, but at the same time, I'm a bit disappointed that some of my favorites didn't make it on. As I mentioned in my previous video, one of the themes that I've noticed in the books that have been published sort of from last year to this year is that we're getting a lot of historical retellings. Quite a lot of the books on this year's long list reflect that also. And we've got quite a lot of historical fiction, quite a lot of historical retellings or reimaginings, which I love. And so, yeah, I'm really pleasantly surprised by that. We've also got quite a lot of experimental titles on the long list this year, which is really fun. I've been quite surprised seeing how varied the writing styles are. I think we have a little mix of everything. We've got some books that are written in your traditional sort of streamlined novel way, and then we've got some others that are very experimental. We've got stream of consciousness, we've got blending of different modes from letters to prose to everything. So I think that there's quite a good variety in the different styles. So without further ado, these are the books that I have read so far. As I mentioned, I have currently read 5 out of 13 books on the long list. I'm currently reading my 6th book, which is We Are Green and Trembling. And today I would really like to start my 7th book, which is The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran. So hopefully today I'll be able to read my 6th, start my 7th, and I've also got an 8th, but I don't think I will read my 8th today as well. If I had to summarize my reading experience of the long list so far, I would have to say that there's a lot of historical fiction going on here. And I'm starting to see these loose threads that are starting to come together of themes that keep propping up in all of these books. For example, one of the themes that I have found keeps popping up is this element and theme of war. So while I haven't read The Remembered Soldier Literally everyone pray for me because I don't know how I'm going to read a 700-page book. But while I haven't read The Remembered Soldier, obviously that one takes place in the midst of a war and it's telling the perspective of a soldier. Now, while a lot of these don't deal with war directly as The Remembered Soldier does, there's like an overarching theme of war and battle in every single one of these. In The Deserters, which I recently finished, this is a novel that's kind of telling two stories at the same time. One story which is told from the perspective of a mathematician's daughter who is looking back on her father's life, and she's sort of telling the story from the present day. She's in a conference that is being held in memory of her father with other mathematicians and renowned scientists. And at the same time, she's transcribing her father's and mother's love letters. You find out that her father was actually a survivor from World War II. Through her father's letters and memories and looking through his mathematical discoveries, she sort of starts to piece together this narrative of hope and this idea of mathematics as the hope in the middle of the war and the thing that like sort of really keeps him going, as well as his love for his wife. So that's happening on one story. And then in the other story, you've actually got a soldier in an unnamed war who is trailsing through the woods and he's just trying to get to the border. Now, we don't know where he is, we don't know what's happening, we don't know what war, and we don't really know anything about it. It's just this very harrowing perspective of the war from the soldier's point of view. And this is told in a stream of consciousness, very like unpunctuated prose, and it's just very, very, very immersive. So obviously contrasting this very sophisticated, more like streamlined prose about the mathematician's life with the perspective of the soldier, we've got this like very contrasting novel. Now, I can't say that this novel was for me, but obviously there is this very prevalent theme of war and these two perspectives about hope and betrayal and how to get through these very harrowing times. So, yeah, this one directly deals with the war, which is quite interesting. Now, in this one, On Earth as It Is Beneath, while it's not dealing with war directly, this takes place in a remote prison in sort of this deserted, abandoned piece of land in Brazil. And it's basically the place where they send prisoners to die. The novel takes place when the prison is basically on the brinks of closure. And the authority figure in power there, he is losing his marbles and he decides to execute the prisoners. And in order to do so, he sort of makes them run for their lives and then he chases them. He enjoys the hunt, he enjoys the thrill, and obviously no one escapes. And so while this one does not deal with the war directly, you get these elements of, I guess, conflict and battle between authority figures and the prisoners, and also this disillusion of the unjust justice system and the mistreatment of these prisoners who are essentially discarded by society and left here to die. Obviously, as well, you've got these like sort of battle scenes as these prisoners are sort of running for their lives. So while it's not a prevalent theme and there's no war and cannons and direct like battles, you do obviously have this like raw masculine violence and this conflict between powers, I think is quite interesting. So She Who Remains was actually one of my predictions. So I'm so pleased to see it on the actual long list. If you haven't read this yet, I really recommend it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. In She Who Remains, we don't have a direct reference to war either, but I would say that there are, again, these like very prevalent themes of conflict, particularly, the conflict between societal standards and religion and the way that it oppresses women, particularly told through the main character, who obviously has to renounce her sexuality, renounce her gender as a woman in order to become a man, in order to escape an arranged marriage. So here, we've got more themes about the violence that men and society inflict on women and the effect that that has, and the oppression and mistreatment of women. While there's no direct war here, there is obviously the war in the main character's mind as she's sort of battling with themes of what she wants to do versus what she's told she has to do. And the same with her gender, like the way she wants to express herself versus the way that she's being forced to express herself. Again, no appearance of war per se, but definitely like a war of the self. Moving on to the Duke, this was another one of my predictions, and I am absolutely so thrilled to see this here. I'm honestly, when I saw the Duke on the list, I absolutely screamed. I'm so happy for Antonella. Like, this book is great. And it is a big one, but it's so worth the journey. As I mentioned in my previous review, and as I've mentioned in my interview, this is epic in both size and narrative. I think it's super cool. While this one doesn't deal with your typical war either, this does have elements of sort of family feuds and I guess like ancestral responsibility and those sort of preoccupations. You know, it's two men fighting over land and they get really petty. I guess it's like a modern day battle, right? So instead of using cannons and weapons and different ways to acquire this land, they sort of hit each other with lawsuits, lawyers, papers, contracts. They, use family members to get into their heads. Like, it's just a funny way of showing like a modern day type of war, especially one over land, which is, as medieval as they go. Knowing that Matteo Melchiorre is a historian as well, it's just maybe like a funny way of him showing us that history does repeat itself. So even though it won't be dealing with like war and weaponry directly, the preoccupations of, well, what would my ancestors do? Would my ancestors want me to fight for this land? What should I do? What's the noble thing to do? And those sort of questions that prop up in this book, I guess, just sort of put a modern day spin on war. And interestingly, The Wax Child is another book that I read on the long list. And while I didn't predict this, I read this all the way in November and I did really enjoy it. So I was pleasantly surprised to see it on the long list. One of the International Bookers criteria for books that make it onto their long list and shortlist is a book's rereadability. And so because I read this all the way in November, this is one that I'm going to have to reread in order to understand like why the judges picked this. But again, this one does not deal with war as we know it directly. The novel follows a woman called Christens, and it follows her all the way through until she is arrested and furthermore executed for being thought of being a witch. And so the novel sort of follows her throughout her life and the friendships that she makes and the sort of coven that she builds and the spells that they craft. This book is very atmospheric and it's very, again, told in like this like broken vignettes, stream of consciousness kind of way. And it's also narrated from The Wax Child, which is essentially like a mini voodoo doll of types that is made out of wax. And this little figurine follows Christens throughout her life and it sort of narrates everything. While this one doesn't deal with like a battle necessarily, it's definitely a conflict between the way that women want to be, the way that women are, and the way that they were, stripped of their autonomy, accused of being witches, tortured, and mistreated. Yeah, this is a really interesting one and I'm excited for my reread. Not pictured because I don't have a physical copy yet. I'm currently reading We Are Green and Trembling. It's a historical retelling, I would say a historical reimagining, and it's told from the perspective of a trans conquistador, a trans colonizer who settles in the New World, and consequently he sort of kidnaps / adopts these two Guarani girls, and he's sort of writing a letter to his aunt who's all the way back in Spain, and at the same time he's sort of teaching and instructing the girls how to be good Catholics. And I guess he's trying to colonize them in both mind and body. I guess like there are also these themes of war because we've got the Spanish conquistadores who come over to the New World. They're also executing and slaughtering the Indians and the indigenous people that live there. And so you've got this like conflict again over land, again ownership. What I'm loving and enjoying about it is the two Guarani girls are so funny and they keep interrupting the narrative and sort of really showing just how stupid the conquistadors like way of being is. They keep questioning everything. They bring a real sense of like childlike wonder that I'm really enjoying. So today I've just given you a little bit of a flavor, a little bit of a taste for the books that I've read so far on the long list. I'm hoping to do more detailed reviews once I've made more progress on the long list. I don't know that I will have read all 13 books, but I'd like to get as pretty close as I can. And hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, I'll sit down and film my review videos and also announce my predictions before the announcement on the 31st of March. So I've just finished We Are Green and Trembling, and I really enjoyed it. I've actually surprised myself with how much I enjoyed it. I've been speaking to a bunch of other bookstagrammers, and not everyone has had a positive experience, and I can completely see where they're coming from. It is an unusual narrative style, so it does take some getting used to, but I think I just personally really enjoy stream of consciousness kind of narratives, and this story is mixing personal letters that they're writing to someone at the same time. It's like taking place in the present day, then doing flashbacks and telling the story of everything that happened until they got there, and then it's also weaving other voices throughout. So I really like those kinds of like vignette style disjointed narratives. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I also like the Latin American element of the story. And while it is telling the story of the colonization of South America from the perspective of a colonizer, I think that it is doing something new in the sense that it's telling the story in a way that it's not always sympathetic, which is great, and it is portraying some of the violence, and it's telling it in a very sort of satirical way because it's being narrated by the colonizer himself. There are these like elements of irony and satire that are like perforating through the narrative. In the novel, he's kind of telling the story as in quite like a heartfelt way as he grows attached to the two Guarani girls that he's rescued. I'm a bit hesitant to say that that's the truth, and I don't really know if the reality would have been so sweet, I guess. I'm excited to like go home and like research. I like that it's highlighting a historical figure who most people don't know about, and the fact that he was trans. I'm quite interested in the fact that Gamera has decided to tell the story from his perspective. But overall, I did really enjoy it. I just need to go away and do my homework, I think. I was probably at the cafe for about an hour and a half. It's only a small cafe, so I couldn't really film there. But yeah, I had my little outdoor time for the day, I think. Next up, I've got The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran, which I don't really know much about. I just know that it revolves around one family and it's set in Iran. I'm quite excited to dive in and to learn a little bit more about this part of history. So a couple of hours have passed and I'd say I've made a pretty good dent on the book. I'm currently on the 3rd out of 5th part of the book. So the novel is split into 5 parts. The first part takes place in 1979 and it's narrated by Behzad, who is the father. Then the second part is narrated by Nahid, who is the mother, and this takes place in 1989, and she's living in Germany. And then I've just reached the third section now, which is narrated by Lale, who is the daughter, and this takes place in 1999. So the whole novel has sort of 10-year time jumps that just sort of show you everything that's been happening in Iran in the last sort of decade between them. I really like the multiple narrations of the novel, and I'm learning a lot about what Iran was like pre-revolution, during revolution, and how the lives have affected both men and women. So I'm finding it really interesting and I'm learning a lot. This is an aspect of history that I actually don't really know much about. And with what's happening in Iran right now, it feels all the more poignant to educate myself on this aspect of history. So yeah, I'm finding it really interesting and I am really enjoying it. So I'm going to spend the rest of today just reading as much as I can before heading out with some friends. So this concludes my little reading vlog for today. Thank you so much for joining me and for spending the day with me. It's been a lot of fun to film something a little bit different, a little bit more informal than what I'm used to. And yeah, apologies for my little shaking hand. If you'd like to see me review these and some other titles on the long list, stay tuned. I'll be hopefully filming that in the next couple of weeks. I'll be sharing my thoughts on them very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching.